The town of Red Rock was a place where laughter was sharp as knives and cruelty often wore the mask of humor, and no one understood this more than Caleb Turner, a cowboy who had lived his life on the edges of society, working cattle alone, speaking little and drinking less, a man haunted by the silence of prairie nights and the weight of old regrets. The folks in town called him the Lonely Rider, partly because he kept to himself, partly because it seemed he had no kin, no woman, no place he belonged. And when the local ranch hands wanted sport one evening, they decided to play a cruel trick on him, dragging a limping young woman into the saloon and telling Caleb she was his prize, laughing at the thought of saddling the quiet cowboy with someone they thought useless, someone they believed no man would want. And all eyes turned to Caleb as the woman, dirty, bruised, and walking with a painful limp, stood under the glow of the lantern, her face flushed with humiliation, her fists clenched in shame, her dark eyes flashing defiance though her body betrayed years of hardship. Caleb rose slowly from his chair, his spurs jangling in the silence, his hand brushing the brim of his hat, and instead of laughing, instead of turning away, he walked straight to her and said in a voice steady and low, "Come with me, miss," shattering the crowd's laughter into an awkward hush, for no one expected him to accept her with such calm dignity. That night Caleb gave her his cot in the small shack he called home and slept by the door with his saddle for a pillow, while she watched him from the shadows, wondering why he had not turned her away, why he had not mocked her limp or thrown her to the streets. And in the morning, when the sun rose golden over the wide plains, he cooked her beans and coffee and asked her name. She told him it was Eliza, and she had once been a fine rider before a fall from a wild stallion left her leg broken wrong, forcing her into a life of begging and ridicule. Yet she still dreamed of horses, of speed, of wind in her hair, and Caleb listened, not with pity, but with the respect of a man who knew what it was to carry scars. In the days that followed, the town watched with sneers and whispered jokes as Caleb bought her boots, mended her dress, and began to teach her again, first how to sit a saddle without pain, then how to balance despite her limp. And though she fell more than once, each time Caleb was there, strong hands lifting her up, his quiet words steady as stone. Again, "Eliza, don't you quit now," until the sneers of the townsfolk grew uncertain, replaced with curiosity. For slowly the limp woman was changing before their eyes, her back straightening, her eyes fierce, her laugh returning. And when she finally managed to ride a spirited mare across the dusty street without stumbling, the crowd that had once mocked her stood silent, unable to deny what she had become. Caleb entered her into the county riders' meet, and the day she rode before them all, dust flying, hair streaming, her limp forgotten as horse and rider became one. The town that had laughed fell into stunned applause, for she rode with fire, courage, and grace. And when she dismounted before the judges, Caleb's steady hands at her elbow, it was not a limping woman they saw, but a rider who carried pride in every breath. From that day forward they called her the Pride of the Riders, and though the joke had been meant to break both her and Caleb, it had instead bound them together. A lonely cowboy and a scarred woman who found in each other not shame but strength, proving to every watching eye that a person is not measured by their scars, but by how fiercely they rise after the fall. So remember, friends, every scar hides a story. Every broken step can lead to triumph if you refuse to bow to cruelty. And if this tale of the lonely cowboy and the limping woman touched your heart, don't forget to like this story, subscribe to the channel, and ride with us for more powerful tales of grit, courage, and redemption on the wild frontier. The weeks after Eliza's triumph at the county meet changed Red Rock in ways no one had expected. For suddenly the same voices that had once mocked her now spoke her name with respect. And where once she had been shunned, she was now sought after for advice, for company, for the quiet inspiration of her presence. Yet even with this newfound admiration, Caleb kept his distance from the noise, choosing instead to keep to the open range, the cattle trails, and the quiet of his small cabin. And though he never asked for credit, it was clear to all that without the lonely rider, Eliza's flame might never have burned so bright. Still, not everyone was pleased with her rise, for pride and cruelty die hard in the hearts of jealous men, and the same ranch hands who had once made a joke of her now found themselves the butt of town gossip Their prank turned against them, and resentment festered like a thorn beneath the skin. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon and the streets of Red Rock filled with long shadows, 3 of those men cornered Eliza near the stables, their words sharp and mean, their eyes gleaming with spite, saying she was nothing without Caleb, that her limp made her weak, that she had no right to stand among riders born whole. And though fear gripped her chest, she stood her ground, her voice steady as she told them that no man had the right to measure her worth. And just as their anger threatened to turn into violence, the unmistakable sound of spurs cut through the dusk, slow and deliberate, and Caleb stepped into the lamplight, his eyes cold as steel, his voice like gravel, saying only, "She rides with me." The men, cowards at heart, scattered beneath the weight of his stare, and Eliza, though shaken, felt her heart swell with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she had long thought lost a trust in another soul. From that night on, the bond between them grew stronger, unspoken yet undeniable, forged not in words but in deeds, in the way Caleb would ride beside her, matching her pace, in the way Eliza would tend the horses with him in silence that was never empty, in the way they shared the simplest of meals and the hardest of labors as though they had always belonged together. But the true test came when the county announced the Grand Riders competition, a brutal course known for breaking even the best of horsemen, a challenge of endurance, courage, and sheer will. The thought of Eliza entering sparked whispers of disbelief, some calling it madness, others mocking once again. Yet Caleb never doubted, and when he told her, "If you want this, I'll ride every mile with you," she felt the strength of his faith carry her higher than her doubts. The day of the competition dawned with a sky the color of fire. The crowd gathered from miles around, riders boasting of their skill, their families cheering from the rails, and when Eliza appeared astride her mare, her limp visible as she dismounted to register, the laughter began again, softer this time, but still cruel, for old habits die slow. Caleb, at her side, laid a hand on her shoulder, his gaze locking with hers, and in that quiet moment the world seemed to fall away, leaving only the certainty of the trail ahead. The course was merciless ravines, fences, water crossings, and the unrelenting heat of the sun, but Eliza rode with a fire no one could deny, her limp no hindrance as her body moved with the horse as though born to it. Caleb never far behind, his steady presence like a wall of strength, shielding her from the doubts that trailed like dust in the air. When she stumbled at a water jump, nearly unseated, the crowd gasped, but Caleb's voice rang out across the field, firm and unyielding, "Get back up, Eliza, ride." And she did, pushing through the pain, through the fear, through every mocking voice that had ever tried to silence her, until at last, against all odds, she crossed the finish line not first, but proud, her head high, her spirit unbroken. And in that moment the crowd rose to its feet, not for the riders who had beaten her time, but for the woman who had beaten despair itself. From that day forward, she was no longer the limping woman, no longer the subject of cruel jokes, but the pride of the riders, her name spoken with reverence across the plains. And beside her always was Caleb, the lonely cowboy who had chosen kindness over cruelty, faith over laughter, and love over loneliness. In the years that followed, the two became inseparable, partners not only in the saddle but in life, building a ranch together where outcasts found welcome, where broken horses were given second chances, where every scar was seen not as a weakness, but as a story of survival. And though Caleb never cared for crowds or praise, those who knew the tale said it was he who had taught Eliza to rise, and she who had taught Caleb to belong. So, dear listener, if you carry scars, if you walk with a limp the world mocks, remember Eliza's ride, remember Caleb's steady faith, and know that pride is not born of perfection, but of perseverance. And if this story lit a fire in your heart, if it reminded you that even the broken can become legends, then don't forget to like this tale, subscribe to the channel, and ride with us again for more stories of courage, redemption, and the unyielding spirit of the frontier.